Hey, good morning. Good morning. Dog's barking. Sun's barely coming out. It's Sunday morning. We're back here with a cup of coffee and a jackfruit. Thanks for joining us this morning. It's kind of a special morning. You know, this show, we look back over the week at all the news and try to find a positive spin on it. Try to talk about things that matter to us all. I was reflecting on this whole, quarantine thing we got going on. My auntie, Ramona Brown, she's the matriarch of our family. She passed away a couple days ago. They're going to have the funeral later on this month. None of us are going to be able to be there. They're only going to let 8 people come to the funeral, 9 people at the church. I guess the 9th person's going to be the padre. Really makes you think about the world we're in right now. So, this morning, I got some old friends coming. We're just going to try to talk about some things that matter. Thanks for joining us. It's Sunday morning. Let's start it with a prayer. Iko makoe makui loko kalani. Mahalo pia nakue. Mai kaunali'o. Mai kaunalipo. Mai kahikina. Mai kaulana. E hele mai o e atu e. E hele mai e ku. Ahina. A tangaroa a tāne. E hele mai e kanaha kalai. E kanawai, e hele mai oi e au makua. Mahalo ke akua. As above, so below. May it be on earth as it is in heaven. Please, give us this day and forgive us. Please help us to forgive. Please, no temptation and no evil. Mahalo ke akua. May we be a blessing to each other. Mahalo ke akua. May you be a blessing to us all. Hey, look who's come to see us. Even the Talima. We got friends coming to the house. You guys head inside. I'll catch up with you. Welcome. It's Sunday morning.
I have listened to my heart, and it speaks to me of danger, of danger. I have watched the tides of change in a homeland overrun with strangers, of the people lost at sea, drift amid the noise and the frustration, losing all they hold dear, giving in to all of their fears. Still my course remains clear. Paleuli.
Ooh. So, what a morning we got going on here. It's Sunday morning, yet again. I'm back in the hacienda with some friends. It's a boys' show this morning. All apologies to the goddesses. All apologies. It's just that every once in a while, only the boys come out to play. And this is one of those whiles. So I'm really glad to be here with some fabulous folk. I want to say something as we get started here about my Auntie Mona. She was fabulous. Top shelf.
Oh, no.
Used to carry me on her knee and sing Never on a Sunday. Fabulous. That memory is burned in my mind. Mahalo yoi. Mahalo keakua. So, hey, without further ado, let me switch over and introduce everybody this morning. I think I got it with us, Daniel Wildcat, good old Jimmy Love, and of course, Papa Li'i of Ingleo Doctusi. Morning, gentlemen.
Aloha.
Good morning.
Okay.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Most especially you, Daniel. You've been out on an adventure lately. Good to have you back.
Well, I tell you, it's good. It's good to be here. I guarantee you. It's very good to be here. Yeah, I had a little health scare a couple of months ago, and you know, I'm really thankful to my family and some incredible EMS workers because they really did some good work. And here I am and feeling good and ready to get with it. So
right.
it's a gift every day, right? It's a gift.
Every day.
That breath of life.
Yeah,
And, so thank you for the invite to be here.
Oh, no, man. Thank you for being here. It's really a pleasure. I know we talked before, but the Sunday morning thing, this is a good thing, I'm thinking. Hindsight 2020, little bit of reflection time. We get to look back, and this morning is such a nice conversational show. Jimmy Love, I know you've been out on that same adventure, that same walk that Daniel was out on.
Well, yeah, I've been, I had my third open heart surgery for unique reasons, but as opposed to the typical atherosclerosis, I had a bad valve and I had a replacement of the valve. Anyway, they go and they carve you up like a Thanksgiving turkey and they open you up and they go to work. And, you know, there's nothing like a little close dancing with mortality to adjust your perspective on life.
Yes. I believe that, he says, coughing. He says coughing in this environment with coronavirus, which I love, right? I love that whole fear reaction. And we're going to take a look back at that, too. Good morning, Pali. Great to see you this morning.
Yeah, I feel like a tea bag.
Wow.
You don't know how strong you are until you put in hot water.
Oh,
So I really appreciate what you're saying, Dan. Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
with you.
Both of you guys, all three of you, in fact.
No. It's good to see you, Tapali. It's really good to see you. This morning is kind of a special Sunday morning. It's just the boys. I wanted to talk about a little bit about our mortality. How's that going to be for us? So it's Sunday. We should talk about things that matter. It's like Sunday go to church. It's we should take on the subject matters that matter to our communities. So really, thanks for joining us, you guys. Pali, how are things over there on Oahu during this pandemic?
Well, we're maintaining a traditional social distance, so we're doing just fine.
Maintaining traditional social distance. I like that. Myself included, doesn't seem like there's much changing or much going on. So, how are things over there in Kansas, Daniel? I neglected to tell people that you're way over there in the lower 48.
Right in the heartland, right in the middle of the contiguous 48 states. We're doing well. We're into like week 4 of our stay at home. sort of mandate, and it's you kind of miss being out more intimately with your children and your grandchildren, that kind of thing. But I mean, we're getting used to it, and we got a nice yard we can sit out in and listen to the birds and watch the flowers and the sun come up and the sunset, and that's pretty valuable.
Oh yeah, that sounds valuable to me anyway. I'm glad just to have it one more time. How about you? Every morning when the sun comes around, every morning I get to jump up and down and thank everything and everyone for being still here. Thank you. Daniel, it's really good to see you, man. Jimmy Love, what's been going on in the big wide world?
Oh, it's all on the TV, everything you wanted to know and almost everything you didn't want to know. And except for the really important stuff, we'll never know about that because they're not going to tell us that.
Yeah, that's got some historical prevalence. And I just
that
wanted
in
to
and mention
of itself is one of the reasons I'm glad Daniel's joining us this conversation, because, boy, he ought to have a perspective on that. James, continue. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No. I just wanted, I my work before I retired, I was one of the people that would come to Daniel in his time of need, and it was always an amazing. Both sides of the equation were amazing. When somebody passed on, and when you were able to bring them back. And I'll never forget the one time when, no matter what we did, every piece of equipment that we had failed. It was almost like the guy was right there with us, pulling out the IV, pulling the hoses out of the heart-lung the CPR machine. And it's just like there was nothing we could do. Often there was nothing we could do. But in this case, it was like he was there saying, I'm out of here.
Oh, man. That's kind of a rough ride, if you ask me. That's for sure. But
it was a very educational job.
I know. It's that sort of stuff that makes us think about the way we spend our time. And
there you go.
I'm gonna have to try and figure out a better way to get this switcher running, because I don't like this one-off conversation. So I think I'm going to switch us all out, you guys, to a gallery view. Therein, we're all looking at everybody all at once, and I feel more like we're in the same room. Is that okay with you guys?
That
sounds good.
Excellent.
Sounds good.
This is so much better and so much more to my liking. It's like seeing you guys again, which I really appreciate. Sort of whoa, I'm beginning to notice it's like a graybeards club. It's not something I thought I was signing up for. I noticed Jimmy and Pa are going for the clean-shaven look. And I see you, Daniel. You're looking like a bear, a little bit like me, and not taking the time to shave. These must be the two faces of our new social distancing.
Where's Greta Thunberg when we need her?
Right, exactly.
No, that's it. How's the family out there, Polly?
It's great. Traditional social distance is what we've been doing for millenniums. Been surrounded by elders, our parents, our children, our grandchildren, our aunts and uncles. So nothing new.
Yeah, I hear
all
you.
good.
I hear you. Yeah. Some of the new traditions too, like ha'ole. I was explaining the other day. Wow, everybody gets to experience that because it means without breath, and for decades I've been trying to say to people, it's not a racist term. I don't know why the white chichas, the palongis, it's like, why are these people saying, whoa, that must mean a white person, which it's come to in a weird, modern context. But the no breath is a health order, and now everybody's sort of experiencing that. You breathe, you hongi, 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 but that one haole, you do not breathe with, because the diseases, because of those epidemics. And I think, Daniel, your folks know a little something about those epidemics.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges we've had here, being at Haskell Indian Nations University now for over, what? Oh my gosh. Let's just say 3 decades, 3 decades plus and counting. This was one of those things where we had to really take it very seriously. And I will say that I think our university leadership just made an excellent call because, if you wanted a formula for disaster, here's what you do. Let's invite Native people from all over the United States to one place, okay? One place. And from Alaska, from the contiguous 48 states, typically we have 100 plus nations and Alaska villages represented on our campus, and usually 40 states out of the United States, not including Hawaii, darn it, but we're going to change that. That's something I'd like to see changed. But, you wouldn't want to have a disease outbreak and then disperse students back all over the United States. That's a formula for a kind of catastrophe, unfortunately, we saw in our previous history. And so all of us, I think, have know that history, and that's something that we were very mindful of. So, I think we made the adjustment. We're doing everything online now, and it's good. You don't get the kind of contact with students you'd like, but you know what? We're still doing the work, and that's what counts. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. And this is very interesting. I mean, that we parlay up the capacity to do it and the cultural knowing. And a lot of that brings to mind this idea that some of those instances, those epidemics, were instituted by some institutional organizations with the full awareness of the United States government. Of course, that kind of stuff doesn't surface for a century or so. Wouldn't you say, Daniel?
Yeah, I think it takes a while, and we still have people who argue the point, and what really happened. But we have traditions and stories where this history is well known amongst our people. So yes, I think it's a time to really think about what we owe our ancestors, the kind of resilience they demonstrated in surviving many attacks, cultural, disease attacks, you name it, political, legal. So, it's good to be with you brothers this morning, because I think there's still some really good news, that we can share with people. It's real easy to get very, very depressed, maybe, down about the situation that we look at daily on the TV. I want to hear James talk a little more about that. I mean, boy, one good thing is to not pay too much attention to the TV, or that might get you depressed really quick.
Well, that's the whole thing, right, Jimmy? I mean, take us on that ride. That's the whole point. These shifting narratives have been going on for centuries.
Yes. That's why it's funny. One thing that Oliver Stone did, besides make a lot of great movies, was he got them, or the powers that be, to turn conspiracy theory into a fantasy, a nutbag thing, when in fact, all you have to do is go to your favorite history teacher and he'll tell you our history is nothing but one conspiracy after another, one brother poisoning another. It goes on infinitum. conspiracy is the lifeblood of politics.
You know, we call them pilauticians around here. You know what I mean? And pilau is the Hawaiian word for something that is rotting when the leaf is turned up. You know, it's really interesting.
Yes. We did a couple good things here. We did a lot of bad things on our arrival because we had bad parenting. I'm talking about white European immigrants into North America, South America. We had very bad parenting. A lot of that was being controlled by religion or the fear of not having the right religion. And one of the things that we did here, which was great, was freedom of religion and then the separation of church and state. Those are two great ideas that sort of helped us evolve in some ways. Many ways we haven't evolved much, but we certainly did that here. And now, of course, we're controlled mostly by what we hear and see on the TV. And it's important to remember that money and interests have control of that medium. And they control things so that they don't lose their money and power. That's not a conspiracy. That's normal.
It's just good business. It's just good business.
Good business that may be bad for us at times. And in the olden days, we were afraid of the unknown. And now I think it's time for us to start putting on our big boy pants and being afraid of what we know.
Right. And I mean, Pali, how does it impact the economics at the time? I mean, you're working right in that, trying to develop some sufficiency for the islands.
Yeah, one of the things I'm looking at is we're really focused on the science, which I think is very good, but science alone isn't going to get us where we need to go. Because there are some things we can heal with our humanity that we cannot cure with our science.
Yes.
You know, and I really thank Dan for bringing up the greatest source to meet these challenges today is the repository of wisdom that has been passed on by our ancestors. I try to work with, especially with when I was on faculty with my students, and then when I do work with the villages and the communities, that the textbook provides you with knowledge, but the experience in working among your own people on the ground provides you with wisdom. Mm-hmm. One of the most important things is understanding the difference that you don't need a chemistry lab or engineers to try to fix the problem. And I think the problem is the word fix. Mm-hmm. Fix comes from the metaphor during the 16th and 17th century, where the great European philosophers likened the universe like some huge mechanical machine that operated with machine-like regularity. You know, you fix things. Our world is we don't fix things, we cure things. We heal things. So we have a sort of a paradox here. Like we have great leaders amongst our people who are like great gardeners. And as great gardeners, they work on healing. And rather than adopting the role of a mechanic, they basically become one with the gardener and with the earth and with the plants and with the people and with the creatures. So instead of fixing the ground with chemicals and machines, our ancients, our wise ancestors taught us how to heal it with aloha and wisdom. And until we can get out of that mindset that unless it can be quantifiable, it has no relevance or it doesn't exist, then all of our belief systems, all of our wisdoms, all of our mythologies are negated just by one statement of that kind. So I really look very deeply now, more than I ever did, into the wisdoms of our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most profound lessons I learned, which I didn't appreciate at the time, but I do now, is our perspective on leadership. At the College of Business, where I was on the faculty where I taught executive leadership, I realized there's a difference, and I try to teach this with staff, between being a good leader and a great leader. A good leader leads, but a great leader heals. It took a while for someone to wrap their head around that, but I think that's the direction that I'm going to, and I'm encouraged my people and our traditional leaders and our young. We need to move in that direction of healing, and of course, healing that's rooted in wisdom and guided by aloha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really love hearing this, because I'm like an orphan in this conversation, because my people my ancestors didn't have a lot of wisdom, at least that I can figure out. They were clever, and they were really good at getting what they wanted, but that's not the same. And it's been a lovely education to be here, where I met Kalani and a lot of people that really understand what aloha is about, and how together, connected, we can heal and we can make things better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well stated. I think, Papa Lee's comments are right on target. I mean, it's makes a difference whether you see your own life as part of a living universe as opposed to a machine. And I think that's why, we think relationally. That's why we take responsibility, respect, reverence very seriously, because it's about our relatives and our relationships we share our lives with. And I keep thinking, given the kind of crises we're going to face, and we've got a lot we're going to face, I think, here in the future. We're seeing them right now. I mean, COVID crisis is the most immediate, the most palpable, and it's very real. So is climate change. So is the issues in our body politics. So is the issues in education. And yes, even in science. I think I really appreciate Doc's comments about science, because, I think indigenous people have something to say to inform that practice. We're not in a fight with science, because we've been practicing, our own science for thousands of years. That's in part why we are here. Our ancestors were very wise.
Yeah, man, that's true words never spoken, right? It's we're still here. We're still sort of existing. And Pali, your folks know all about that. You've been watching the Hawaii struggle for some time, and the whole shared struggle between Polynesia, the native peoples of North America, truthfully, the native peoples of South America, of the Indian Ocean, the whole thing, it's a shame, but true to form with the framework of the dominant narrative. And it's interesting, because we say we value the truth in democratic society, and yet, as you were alluding, you can chase back over modern history, and it's like, whoa, it's just one giant soap opera. Maybe that's why Korean soap operas do so well, right? It's like, if TV is manifesting the messaging of our lives, and soap operas dominating the daytime hours of television. It's like, no wonder our governance and our lives seem to be helter-skelter. And, Shakespeare is such a big read because, it's one stab in the back, one Macbeth after another. And I think the government has shown this to be so. James and I were talking about recent events. And when we say recent events, I'm talking about JFK's assassination. Government never answered for that. I remember him doing a speech denouncing secret organizations and denouncing, the secret societies of America, and then going to Dallas and whoops. It's like, whoa, that stuff never gets reviewed. And that's recent. That's not even historical. We're not going back to Abraham Lincoln and everything else that happens at the end of the Civil War, that creates this great nation, right? The narrative is a really interesting thing. And I keep wondering, wow, the great emancipator only took them 100 years to get the Civil Rights Act passed. I hope I'm that effective. And they put up a statue for me, but I don't know. Okay. It's Sunday morning. Come on. Let's all be forgiving.
Yes. But when you pull back the curtain and expose the guy behind it, he eventually gets it back in his balloon and flies back to Kansas.
Hey, even on Sunday morning, you got to go back to the vestibules. Mass ends sometime, right? So tell us the story, James.
Well, I don't know. There's so many stories, but the one that keeps getting at me is the one that everybody's afraid to look at, much like it was shortly after the Kennedy assassination. But the University of Alaska at Fairbanks just did a engineering study. Their department, I'm assuming it was a student involved along with a professor.
No, three professors, actually, really fabulous. I mean, good work.
Yeah. And they basically exposed the NIST, the official story of 9/11, at least for building number 7, which is the one that came down after the 2 towers. They basically dissected it and said, no, the NIST report is wrong. And there's no way that fires brought this building. This was a controlled explosion, basically, a demolition, rather. And nobody wants to, and when I say nobody, I mean nobody who's afraid of losing control. The people that are think they have, that the government's in control or they're in control, all these control freaks, that story just absolutely scares the bejesus out of them, because it means that they have to wake up and look, wait, you mean people are lying to us? There's something going on behind the scenes. Nobody wants to hear that. They just want to go to the store. Now they go to the store with a mask on, but they just want to go to the store, get their stuff, come home and watch TV.
I hope that's becoming obvious to everyone, that was your life before this pandemic, right? It's like you go to the store, you get your stuff, you come home and you sit around, right? And now everybody's complaining about what they used to do every day at 7.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is interesting, and I'd like to hear everyone's take on this. I mean, I think so possibly that little kernel of good news is there are some among us, brothers and sisters, indigenous, non-indigenous, who have figured out that going back to normal is not what we want to do right now.
Exactly.
And I kind of like to hear what you think about, brothers, in terms of how do we facilitate that and encourage our young folks to, not buy into that culture of fear,
right?
And start doing some of this hard work. I mean, I'm going to be right there with them, but
as Native peoples, we know this whole experience of epidemics, of losing large numbers of people, of being smart, right? This is not about being stupid, that's for sure, right? This is about protecting your family, protecting your loved ones. You know, my father always used to say, just because you're paranoid, it doesn't mean they're not out to get you,
Right.
right? So it's like, even if you're crazy, this virus will still kill you, right? So you have to behave in a reasonable manner about the communicable diseases and good hygiene. You know, I distinctly remember my grandparents referring to the foreign white devils as being hauna, smelly, right? They considered them wearing all that clothing and sweating all day long as being really foolishness, right? Like not dressing the way the weather dictates or your environment dictates, but you know, choosing to wear 7 layers of corsets and lace and this and that, and then sweating like a pig and smelling offensive to everyone and thinking you're the cultured one. You know, that's the thing that always gets me, is continuing to think that you're the pinnacle of civilization as you bumble around in this giant garment. And today, their grandkids and great grandkids run around in bikinis. I mean, you know, is it me or the world changes? Right? The world always changes. So the change is coming now. So what were they afraid of with all that ton of clothing? Right? And what are they afraid of in those bikinis? In the Me Too nation, right? And what are we afraid of today, right? And how do they use fear to keep this whole thing going on us? Because, you know, my life hasn't changed that much. I kind of like it better. Less people come over to the house and, you know what I mean? I go to the store. Oh my God, there's no actual lines. You know, and there's one line. We wait till we go in, and then it's like, hey, this is pretty nice, you know. There's like nobody trying to get past me in the produce aisle. Just
Well, I
saying.
tell you, it's true. And this thing, because it's a sort of a worldwide thing, it brings us to a point where we have to look at our so-called leaders and say, are they really leading? Are they really even trying to heal? No, they're trying to cover up the fact that they don't know what the hell they're doing. And that's never more evident than when they close down the beaches instead of using the opportunity to keep the beaches open and teach people how to stay away from each other. You know, no, but we're going to keep them off the beaches. It's kind of crazy. Well, that's what we've learned to expect, and I think that's what people have to muster up for. Is that, you know, we've been electing leaders because they look good and they say things. We haven't been electing leaders for what they do. And now's a good time to say, you know what? Let's change that. Let's find the people who actually care.
That's a tough order, pal. I mean, you know, look at heroes like FDR, who muscle the entire country's gold away from them, then doubles the value and makes himself a rich man on the United States government, and we all call him the great savior with the New Deal. Makes me suspicious of the Green New Deal. You know, I thought, I like the Green Deal, but I don't know about a green exploitative deal like what FDR did way back then. And yet, that's one of America's great moments.
Well, because of the other things he did, yes.
I know, but consider that. I mean, that's one of our shining moments. It begins with national larceny from everyone. Right? And the government builds Fort Knox and stores all the gold in one place, doubles the value of the gold, and suddenly America is the richest nation in the world. Say what? Say what? And we're still watching the stock market do what it does. I'm thinking, if you don't feed your children, take care of the old people, make sure the women are unafraid. You ain't really taking care of business. And today, people are living at home. Like they can't go to work. They're not going anywhere. And you know what they get to do? They get to be with their kids all day long, right? And the kids get to like cry and whine and run around and interrupt the TV and their Zoom meetings because, the boss said, and the kids in the background, and they got to feed them. And they got to put up with their grandparents back there in the back room. And there's the wife, and she's worried about what's going on, right? And they got to figure out this whole thing as they're sitting alone in their little dens, right? Guys like us sitting alone in their living rooms going, honey, I don't know when the testing begins. Why are you asking me that question, right? All that is going on for all of us everywhere in the world. Finally, a unified experience for the men. Right? This universal, I don't know what's going on. From leadership, right, to politics, to spokesmen, to all of us in our individual little kitchens going, I guess what's going on is that any more grape juice in the icebox, honey?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God, are we out of toilet paper? Right, that's what's going on. It's like if we were talking about the actual news of the day, it's like Honokaa as toilet paper. Right, you think about the old politics of the 1700s and 1800s. It's like if we were talking about what was the big news in town today, if you actually talked about it from a community perspective and how we're affected, the entire story changes. Right, it's not the NIH story or the CDC story. It's just some crazy story. But hey, Melvin's car broke down and nobody would come out to tow him. Or the next big story would be like, and then the pallet of toilet paper, it went like in 2 hours. Right? It's like, that's like the big story in town. It's not the mindfulness of the government or the inexcusability of our leadership or the fact that the process even seems to be askewed. And all of that is becoming very visible, very relevant, right? What do we do now? In order to go back to the old system, as Daniel was suggesting, we all got to pull on blinders voluntarily, because we all see the dysfunction of the system, right? We all got to pull them back on, just focus on the 401k and dive back in. This is an interesting moment for all of us in the enlightened first world. Right? I'm thinking about Buddha.
It may be that, I've heard, Doc talk about this, in terms of, his experience, in a university business school and him talking about, the importance of leadership and healing. And, I think that we do have an opportunity now. Maybe we've been, remember that song, Looking for Love in all the wrong places? I think we've been looking for leadership in all the wrong places. Yeah. And I really do think that makes politics so difficult and compromised in the United States is we really don't know the leaders we elect. I've never been over to their house of any of the past, so-and-so presidents. I've never been there. We've never, sat by the beach, on the beach or in the forest. I think one of the things that we need to reconsider is that, tribalism may have an opportunity to come back with a lot of the negative colonial kind of baggage that's attached to that, demonstrated for what it is, just that. It's the colonist view of what tribalism. But one of the advantages of tribal societies is we knew our leaders. You weren't, chiefs weren't, and leaders weren't selected by the speeches and the campaigns they lodged. People knew you in your community, in your village, and you earned trust and respect based on how you conducted yourself. And that's something that's valuable. So maybe we'll have an opportunity to start looking for leadership again within our communities. And that applies not just to indigenous people, but non-indigenous people too. I mean, the point of colonialism. My good friend John Hoops, an anthropologist at KU, reminds me honestly. He says, the colonizers paid a high price themselves for colonization and engaging in that.
Yes.
And so I think to a large extent, that's why we have so many friends and allies now that are coming over and saying, hey, help us. We want to do something very different. And that's very positive. That's something we need to explore, encourage, and see how that works out,
Yeah, I mean, pull back the curtain and, the curtain gets yanked all the way back to Europe, France, Holland, England, some 5 centuries ago. A lot of weird stuff going on. Everything from the Caribbean, the birth of democracy over there in the Caribbean, only squashed by the British and the Dutch empires, right? And the slavery that ensues and, everything that goes on that, like we say, we rewrite in modern times. The Dutch are such lovely people. Hey, you can go to, Holland and get stoned. It's like, yeah, thank you, Vaughn. But in fact, the history is rather violent. The Swiss, they got a brilliant image. We say Swiss, you think chocolate, watchmakers, big busty milkmaid girls. I'm sorry, one of the toughest militias, the Vikings, backing up into the mountains with everybody's gold. Right, but they create a whole different image, as Jimmy says, on television. The visual image that becomes the onslaught of modern storytelling, modern myth telling. They understand how to recast the myth, right? The head of England, since Wilhelm the Conqueror, was never bloodless. You know what I mean? Whoever's sitting there in London and in the palace, you're not bloodless, right? So how come they create this perfect image of an old lady, right? What are you talking about? She's granny. She wouldn't hurt anybody. Are you kidding me? Have you seen the financial holdings?
Follow the money. If it's not a crime of passion, follow the money.
Right? So what does corporate America do about us now? I mean, I look down the street, the stores are closed, a few places are eking out takeout food. People are rediscovering cooking. It's not a packaged society like it was a month ago. It's a different kind of package.
No, you got to think before you take a step. We're not used to thinking before we take a step. We're just used to having an idea and then trying to attain it.
I'm wondering, I've been asked directly in community about the spiritual aspects of this moment we're engaged in. And I find that in and of itself engaging, since to me everything is a spiritual moment, right? It's like, what? I didn't know there was some time when the switch was off. But this idea that there is something, of course there is. Of course there is learning in this. Of course it's about the relationship versus the transactional. Of course we're all stumbling. And here we are in a vain attempt to impact the media. I can't thank you guys enough. Are we doing it from our home? Yeah, but I figure it's like Ben Franklin and the old printing press way back when, right? This is what it gets down to. It gets down to individual communities and people speaking to each other as human beings, sharing a conversation about what does leadership mean? What do we want to see in our children and our families, in our lives? Then the Sunday morning. Man, Sunday, none of us were at work anyway. Right? We were all in the living room anyway. Hell, most of our friends are dead. You know what I mean? I remember laying on my back in the hospital thinking that for years. Right? Most of my friends are dead. Look like I'm going to go see them. Turns out not. Right? Turns out still here. Looking at Polly, looking at Jimmy, right? Looking at you, Daniel. It's like, wow. We're going to have the Rising Voices Conference in less than a week. And Rising Voices is going to continue for 7 months with working groups and conversations every other week. Something we couldn't do heretofore the first 7 years. How did it take a pandemic for us to get to an actual working conversation?
It's a new day every day, but now we notice it.
Right? That's like the Buddha moment I'm talking about. I think most of us have been noticing it since the day we woke up after that really bad afternoon in the hospital. My favorite thing is like, I was heading, this is 1988, I'm heading to the beach, right, to go surfing. I'm like, I'm finally off. It's morning time. I'm heading to go surfing. On the way into town, I'm feeling a sore throat. Like, hey, this is unusual. Like, I can't hardly swallow. It's like, strep throat. Hey, I better go see my ENT, who I had been seeing the ear, nose, and throat doctor because of some vocal cord operations of my delicate pipes, some time ago. And I thought, I better be safe. I stop in his office on the way to the waves, on the way to the beach, like halfway there, shorts, tank top, ready to go. Hey, doc, can you give me something for my throat? It's kind of scratchy. He sticks that little thing up your nose, and down your throat, to take a look. And man, he yanks that thing out so fast, I thought part of my brains came with it. And he grabs me off the table and he drags me to his car. Not even like an ambulance. He's dragging me to his car and he's yelling at the girl at the front desk, call the hospital, on his way out the door. And I'm like, what's up? Right? And he's like, just come with me. And minutes later, I'm in the ER, and the mask is coming down at 99, 98, 97. That thing. I get to about 94 and and I'm gone. And I wake up, ICU, right? Intubated, noses, hoses, that thing going on, right? And you're like, where am I? Wasn't that your first response, Daniel? Where the hell am I? Right? And it's because you've been gone and back. And I sat there for a while thinking about the gone and back. I felt like I'd been gone for a year and a half. Right? They told me I was out only 11 minutes. And so 11 minutes, they were worried about permanent brain damage, right? Between 4 and 10 minutes and this whole, sort of psych warding me for weeks after this and MRIs out the wazoo, right, on the brain. But no lesions, no nothing. I mean, you guys know my brain. It needs to be spanked around with vodka just to be calm.
Well, we're glad you're here. Go on in. And thank you for putting this beautiful group of people together. It's it's just great to be able to look at your faces and,
Somebody else had a hand.
yeah.
I mean, that's how we're all looking at each other. I keep thinking about you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We must be up to something. I really wanted to put this motley group together, and I do apologize to the goddess. I mean, my wife Julie, she was like, "Yeah, it's all right. It's like a guy's show." I was like, "What? It's like a guy's show?" She's like, "Yeah, you ain't got no women on there." I'm like, "You're right. We're probably irrelevant. There are no women on here. Just bunch of swinging dicks." You know what I mean? We're all chatting in the morning. What are we going to do? Nothing more sacred than Abraham hanging around the fire with Isaac and Esau going, I wonder what they're up to in the tent. Right? That's about as sacred as they got in the old days out in the desert for the good book readers. And, what's been more sacred than the men gathering in circle to do husbandry? And by husbandry, I mean the actual caretaking. So I really appreciate Sunday morning, you guys taking some time out to, share some thinking about how do we caretake our communities? How do we caretake our families? Because, the government is less than sterling about bringing forward information that impacts us all, and politicians, they're moved by the wind, the wind of the moment, the wind of the economics, the wind of their partnership, the wind in their own sails. And those of us that have to retreat to community, a lot of from the health side, from the education aspect, from the response community, we realize that it's not that kind of complexity that makes up our lives. It really is the simple dynamics of our families, of our daily living. Our daily living is going to have to be adjusted. Don't you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Self-sufficiency, I think, is on the table. I know I've been talking about localized, home-scaled food forestry for 13 years. I remember last time I was at Haskell at the NASA, beef up with the great states, and it was wonderful. We were discussing conflict resolution, leadership technique, all those things. And then when they asked me what I thought was really important, I was like, go out and plant tomatoes. If you really want to know what to do, it's like, go home right now and start planting food, plant a garden, having food capacity, understanding your regional capacity. These are important things. The earth, the sky. I think the way my grandfather put it was, you have the family you're born to. Those individuals, you have no choice. They've come into your life early to teach you lessons, specific lessons about yourself, people, and the world. Then you have the family you choose when you jump out into the world, and the people you glom to and connect with and choose to marry and create a family and choose to be with. And those people, they teach you things too, coming and going. And then you have the family you're never without. And that's the grandfather sun and the grandmother moon and the sky father and the earth mother and the woman that is the sea. And these things you're never without, never alone in that relationship. And I think that becomes real in this time when the world goes quiet. You see the atmosphere changing. You can see rivers and lakes changing. Things are changing. They'll begin polluting them again. They'll jump out with their industry. They'll Amazon us up. Hey, I'm missing hey, drop that at my door in 48 hours. But the truth is, we cannot continue consuming the world in this fashion. We've come to an unexpected pause. How do we take advantage of this relational moment to learn something? Ah,
Well stated. Yep.
Well, I just want to say before we go, what a pleasure it's been to spend this time with a group of men who understand that without women, not only would our life be cold, loveless, but we wouldn't even exist.
yeah, I'm with you. I know all of your fine ladies, and I know the way you guys feel about them. You know, what a pleasure. I'm wondering if that's not why we're still here at the end of the game. Right? It's like I used to play in a rock and roll band. People know that about me. And there was a story about how I had a 30-day rule. It's like I wouldn't sleep with anybody if I didn't know them for 30 days. And my bandmates, they had a 30-second rule. And it's like, hi, miss, nice to meet you. You know, and it's on, you know. And I was thinking the kind of long-term relationships we're all engaged in. A steady household, attention to grandchildren, attention to family, the intergenerational transfer of knowledge, right? The idea of living peacefully in community is something that we're all drawn to. I know this about you guys personally. Maybe that's why we survive. Maybe that's why, you know, it's the long journey.
You know, if I may add, in many different cultures, they sort of say the same thing about the pure in heart. And that goes along the lines of the eyes of the pure in heart have one language everywhere. So when we discuss issues that deal, there's surface issues like islands on the surface, they can be separate and unique among, to itself. But what that statement says to me is that we are all connected in the deep. So when I speak of Papa, that means Earth Mother, Moku. Dan in Kansas knows exactly what I'm talking about because he has another name for her. They're all different names, but they all mean the same thing. And then when I read more about the Native Americans, my only exposure was watching them get slaughtered on TV programs.
Right.
But then until I was able to actually read and learn and meet people, I was so excited and thrilled and moved that we are connected in the deep, that we believe the same things. I was surprised because they use and they honor intuition. We call it Ike. Ike in Hawaii, in the South Pacific, it's called Ike. It's attunement, sensing and feeling those things that are not readily apparent to others. And it's guided their cultures through millenniums. And Ike, as I learned it, simply cannot occur unless you learn how to trust your heart so that when it speaks to you, you can hear it, you can understand it, and then you can act on it. The fear I have today is it is being overshadowed because it's not being taught or shared sufficiently or woven in the narrative of how we educate our young, our future leaders. The problem is that they are so imbued with knowledge that it's run away from wisdom. These things need to be taught hand in hand because there's no bifurcation in our indigenous minds. They are one and the same thing.
Absolutely.
But the issue then becomes, well, it's because these people, because those people. But the real issue is we look deeper, is it's greed and lust for power.
Yo,
That's a
yo.
Hell, yes.
it's dangerous when it fuels leadership because we see it even amongst our own.
Yeah. And I think that's why I think Shakespeare has lasted through the centuries, is when we talk about Macbeth, he's making clear in those stories to ourselves about power, about greed, and the destructiveness of it.
But we need to separate that so that our young don't grow up angry and hateful. Our
Yes.
biggest challenge is to learn the wisdoms not only by our ancestors, but of the great ancestors of humanity. And some of our most recent tremendous leaders, Nelson Mandela, for example. And I will never forget his quote: when a deep injury is done to us, we never heal until we forgive.
You.
Why is this important to me? Because we have a term for that. It's called dofa fa'amangalo. Dofa means wisdoms, plural, of forgiveness. And the reasons why our elders consider it so important is because the foundation and the source of all good is aloha.
You.
Anything that is a barrier to it is not good. And they have learned through the millenniums, if you cannot forgive, that becomes a roadblock
You.
to aloha.
You.
And so the challenge of forgiveness is, again, putting it in the proper context. It doesn't have to do with absolving someone's offense or betrayal, but it has everything to do with relieving ourselves of the burden of being a victim, letting go of the pain and transforming ourselves from victim to survivor.
Yeah.
That takes on a totally different perspective. Our thinking is energized and our actions more committed and dedicated.
You.
So
Yeah, from
I cannot say enough for the fact that I have been so immature for so long that it's taken 75-year-old grandmothers and grandfathers
you.
who can't speak English, had never read a book, to remind me that there is much lacking there, boy.
Yeah. So the trouble with academia is you actually come away thinking you know something.
Exactly.
There you go.
Or you could be like Daniel, and those are the smart ones I've discovered. They stay in academia for 30 some odd years because they figured out they haven't learned anything yet. They're still trying. Why am I in these buildings? Something must be transferring, right? It's amazing.
Well, thank you guys. And
Yeah.
Thank you
bringing
so much,
wisdom.
fellas. I really appreciate this morning spending the time with you. And you know, I know it's a bit out of Sunday morning. We're going to do this again and further. And Rising Voices, as you know, is coming up. And all three of you are invited. And all four of us will be there with any luck. And it'll be an ongoing discussion in the indigenous community. And we're really proud to be part of it. Thanks for joining us on Hindsite. Jimmy, I want to remind everyone about the bigger message. The government and fake news might be the same thing, you know, so we all need to be responsible for our own knowing. And there's an old saying, I'm switching to camera one. If you trust what you learn on the internet, you're an idiot. So you can garner the information there, just like in the Foundation Trilogy. It's right there in front of you. But what you do with it is your own business. And you have to be responsible for vetting the truth. So please, be responsible, represent all sides, be transparent at least about your own foibles. And we'll see you guys next week on Hindsight 2020. Here's a little song I wrote for my mom. It's for my Auntie Mona. Mona Brown, no Mona Brown, Makawao, Maui, Mahalo kia kua.
Go ahead, pull those boats ashore. We're waiting. Take the best, come back for more. We're waiting. That's what hospitality is for waiting, for waiting. Waiting here with open doors. Sugar crops from across the sea invading. Heaven help us, missionaries pontificating. Piece of paper took my heart from me. I'm waiting, I'm waiting. They say it's the land of the free. I'm still waiting. I've been waiting for a change to come. It seems I got a long way to go. I've been thinking this'll all work out, but I really, really don't know. Go ahead, build that interstate. Traffic's waiting, traffic's waiting, traffic's waiting. Mother Nature's gonna have to wait, so degrading. She's waiting. We're all victims of a twisted fate. Let's not give in to the hate. Keep on waiting. I've been waiting for a change to come. It seems I got a long way to go. I've been thinking this'll all work out, but I really, really don't know. Someday soon we all will be waiting. We'll be waiting. We'll be waiting. We'll be waiting. Our homes, our families, waiting, waiting. Where are we going? It's so unclear. We're waiting, we're waiting. As for me, you find me here. I'm still waiting. I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting. I keep waiting. Keep on waiting. Yeah.